Alright guys, what's going on? Welcome back for another one. I had a friend of mine, or actually a friend of ours, he's got a power washer and the snowblower here. He wanted to get running, so I said, well, bring him over, we'll get him running for you. So this came in as a no start, and immediately when I smelled the gas in the tank, I can already tell we're chasing a carburetor issue. And number two, I don't know if you guys have watched my other videos. If you haven't, watch them. Pull a dipstick, the oil level's super high on it. You could also pull this fill plug here, it'll come spewing out, and if you take a whiff of it, you smell the gas in there. The crankcase is full of fuel. That's common on these Chinese powered MTDs. That's what this is. It's a Troy-built, sorry, MTD Troy-built. It's a 2410 Troy-built, so it's a 24-inch two-stage. Right away when I see symptoms like that, I already know I'm dealing with a needle and seat. It's stuck, it's gummed up. So without further ado, we're gonna start ripping this apart. As you can see, I got it on my lift table, guys. I absolutely love this table. It's the best thing I've ever bought. Wish I'd have bought it 20 years ago. So yeah, let's get started. These can be a little bit of a bugger. It's all 10mm bolts on these, of course, Chinesium. So first things first, we got to get all our controls off. So let me get some pliers and a rag. Put a plastic rag over the controls, pair of pliers, and you got to pull them off. They're just pushed on. As you can tell, it could be a bugger. I don't want to burr up the plastic. If it was mine, I would just put pliers on it and just pull it off. You can see they can be a real bugger. Get a flathead and push it off without busting the plastic or bending up the choke rod. That's the hopes of it anyway. Boy, this one is really on there. Holy crap. I've done some tough ones, but this is... damn, this one's pretty good. Alright guys, you can see how much I had to pry on this thing. Just try not to bend up that choke. Right here, you can always straighten it out, but either way, you have to get this off. The next one's right up here. Your throttle control. Same thing, pliers and a rag. It should pull off. Just like that. Take your key out at the same time, I guess. A little trick. I'm just kidding, it's not a trick. I accidentally did that. Next thing is your two 10s here. 10mm. You got two. And here you can see. I'll get those loosened up. Okay, on your carburetor, you got these two 10 mils. Now you got those four out. I'll show you. This cover can be a bit tricky on these. It's got a little fill-ups over here. Let me rotate the machine. Over here, you got to get the electric start off. Just the electric start, the plug housing for where you plug it in, because you got to be able to get this plastic off. I'll show you. All right here, back these two Phillips out. You're gonna see your E-start drop, and back here is that plastic right here I was talking about. The E-start holds it in. It goes around your shroud. Move this over here so you guys can see. You'll see right here it goes around your shroud. Now you should be able to lift up your muffler cover just enough to start slipping the cover out that covers the carb, just like this. Let me show you something when you get it slipped out. Back in here, these are a pain. You have the vent for your crankcase right here. They can be stubborn. It goes in this cover in the back, right in this area on the back side. Sometimes it's easier to put it back on the valve cover right here when you do put this back together. So anyway, these are not the easiest to work on, okay? I'm just going to tell you that right now. These are kind of a pain in the ass. So you're going to get this up. Since I'm doing this for a video, I'm going to pull the rest of this muffler cover off, get it out of my way. 10 mil here and a 10 mil here. And of course, to get the muffler off, you got to pull, or the muffler cover, you got to get this 10 mil out back here. So take the 10 mil out that holds your your belt guard on, or your belt cover. I think there's one on this side too, right where my finger's pointing, I believe. Maybe not. I'll look over there and let you guys know. Let me zip them out of there. There was another 10 mil on the other side of that belt cover. One thing I do want to mention to you, if you're working in a shop setting or something like that, depending on what you're doing, it's one thing when it's just side work or something like that, just getting it running for the cheap. But always pull your belt covers on these 2 stages, and obviously check your belts out for the customer. Normally I wouldn't take the chute control shaft out of here, but for the video I want to try to make it the best I can for you guys. These can be a little bit of a bugger to work on and get back together right, especially if you're a first timer. I wouldn't rate this the easiest carb clean out job. These carbs are really packed in there with all that plastic crap. Kind of a pain in the ass, really, but that's all right, we'll get it. All right, now down in here, hopefully you guys can see, if you you could either choose to work around this cover the best you can, because you got your kill switch wire in here. I'll show you. On the top, to make this easier on yourself, take these 2 10s out, these 2 10 mils, because you got your kill switch wire and you got your primer bulb line. Then we can get this plastic cover out of the way. Like I said, normally in a shop setting I would try to work around this. I used to work around it, but I want you guys to be able to see the best you can for people doing it at home. Once you pull this out, now look, boom guys, now you got that up out of the way. Putting it back together will be a little bit of a pain, but that's okay. Now pull your primer line off. You can already tell this carburetor might be going right in the garbage. When you start working on these and you start, let me get the camera up there, and you start seeing the throat of the carburetor looking like this and stuff, that's already a bad sign, plus the smell of the old fuel. But since I'm just working on this for a friend, instead of just selling him a new carburetor, I'm going to see if we can get this one running for him. So now pull your choke assembly out. I try to keep these in somewhat one piece, slide it back, and then you lift up on the tab to get it out. Well, there you go. You tilt up on it, and I'll usually leave these on the workbench just like this, so when I put it back together it's easier for me to remember. Now slide your carburetor back. We got lucky, we haven't ripped any gaskets yet, because I probably don't have any. Here's another thing right here. That's the reason this carb has to come off when they're varnished like this. Look at the throttle. Throttle's just stuck. Can't even move the butterfly. This thing's gonna be a nightmare to clean out. Okay, lift up on your governor linkage. Take your fingers, pull up on your governor spring gently, unclip it from there, boom. Now you're off, guys. We got to get the fuel line off. I actually got to drain this out, but the fuel line is self-explanatory. Take your clamp down here or on the carburetor. You could take it off either side. And when I fire this camera back up, we're going to be on the bench tearing into it. A lot of times to drain these, I should mention this earlier, I'll just use an old paint pan, and I'll either pull the fuel line off or I'll loosen up the float bowl. And one thing I'm trying to get better on as I get a little older and a little smarter, I'm trying to wear gloves. I've been handling this fuel. I worked in the shop for a long time. I did small engines growing up as a kid. Years and years and years of carb cleaning stuff probably isn't very good for your hands. So I'm going to try to get a little bit better about wearing gloves. If you guys could smell this fuel, if we had smeller cameras, you would not believe how bad it smells. It's absolutely terrible. Pull this fuel line off. I'm just going to pull it off at the tank. For now, it'll just be easier for me. Alright, I winded up pulling the line off the carburetor to be able to drain the tank out. You can see how nasty the gas is in here. What our friend probably did is put fresh gas in here trying to get it running. Another thing I can say is when I took that float bowl off, no fuel drained out of that float. so you know damn right that that needle's stuck. So we'll get the last little bit drained out. I already got the float bowl off. I loosened that up. Slide this bad boy right off. We'll get her on the drawing table and we'll see what we got. First things first, look at the float bowl. It's all corroded up. Now we have to get the pin out for the float. Pull that out. Oh yeah, look at all the gunk I just pulled out of there, right here. Right where my finger's sitting, that was holding the needle up. The float bowl gasket stayed in here. Let me get my proper screwdriver. All right, you got to make sure you use a nice tight fitting screwdriver down in here for your main jet. I've said it in my other videos, I have one that just fits perfect. What we're gonna do, if I try to loosen that thing, it's gonna snap off in there. So here, pull your idle screw out up top, right here. I'm gonna have to let this thing soak in the ultrasonic cleaner before I can even attempt. Pull your low idle jet out. Push, you gotta pry up on it. There's a tiny, tiny hole in the center of this thing, right in here. Guarantee you that's clogged. Now what we'll do is we'll put in my ultrasonic cleaner for, probably at least a good half hour to an hour, and then we'll try to get that brass main jet out of the middle here. What I like to do is, I'll even clean this needle. I'll pull the needle out of the float. There's a little spring on these. Actually, I'll just leave it in the float, put it in my basket and use the carb to hold it down. Throw my low idle circuit, I'll throw my bull nut. So I don't like this crusty stuff on the bottom here. Wire brush it off or something. You don't want it getting sucked back up into the main jet. I can't get the main jet out of this carb yet, and it's gonna have to come out. So either we let it soak for a while and give it a try, or we're gonna wind up getting a new carburetor for this thing. So put in the ultrasonic cleaner up there and we'll let it sit. While that carb's in there soaking, let's get the oil change going on this. Obviously pull a dipstick out, it'll drain faster. I like to take a block of wood on the front of the machine underneath the skid plate and just tip it back a little bit like that. It's going to be a 10 mil. On these Troy belts, they do give you a nice little drain on these so you don't have a too big of an oily mess. You're going to see how thin the oil is because it's all filled with fuel. These only take like 16 ounces, 18 ounces, right around there. And you're going to see there's going to be a lot more. It's going to drain out of here. One thing to mention on these snow blowers, when you think you got it all drained out, make sure you really tip the machine back, especially when it's an issue like this where it's had fuel in the crankcase. The only thing I will say is the inside of the crankcase will probably be nice and clean, which can be good and can be bad. But I've never had one blow up after the fact of having this problem, so, and I worked on a lot of them that had this problem. I will say, after you run it for a bit, I would re-change the oil again. Sometimes we would, sometimes we wouldn't, depending on the customer. You let it run for, you know, say a good half hour, then change it again. All right, we're gonna put 16 ounces of Earl back in her, and then we'll get that carb back together. Okay, now that I had this in the ultrasonic cleaner for about 45 minutes, let's see if we can crack this main jet loose in here. We hope. Nope. Alright guys, this is the first time I've ever had luck with this. I'm trying to save this carb. I took and drilled a hole out to fit. I drilled the main jet down in there to fit an easy out. Now if this was a shop setting, you would never do this. You would just buy this carb for 10, 15 bucks. But it is coming out. You can see it's coming out. If I have a main jet, we'll be able to save this carb. Well, let me see if I have one. The only problem here, guys, is there's a number of the size jet. It'll say right around here. Obviously, you can tell I had to destroy the jet So if I go online and do a little research, I'm sure I can figure out what size jet is supposed to be in this carb. And let's see if I can't get the middle. This never works. I can't believe that actually worked. See if I can't push the middle jet, the rest of the main jet out. I usually take a flathead. Might have to try from the choke side. Yep. And I'll take and push down on it. There we go. It actually popped out. See, I'll bump it on my workbench. And you'll be able to see all the crud packed in the little holes. This would have never ran. So let me see what I can dig up in my box of goodies, and maybe it'll be my lucky day. As you can see, I keep a box of crap. It's a number 57. This is what I wanted to show you right here on your main jet. Right here. So number 57. We're going to clean it up. Get everything re-cleaned up. I'll stick it back in the ultrasonic cleaner and let's see what happens. Guys, my old main jet on the bottom side, I didn't drill too deep. I was able to take a micro drill bit and I can put it in here and I can tell what size that jet is. It's like a 0.80 millimeter, looks like. So I'm going to do... This is old school shit. Nobody does this anymore. I'm going to take this micro drill bit. I'm going to very gently bore this jet out. Because this number 57 jet is going to be a hair too small for this. So I'm just going to do it by hand real easy. And we're going to open up the orifice. You can see there we go. It took me a while to work it. Most people would not do this. This carburetor is 12 bucks. We're just going to see what happens. She might be jetted a little bit too big. But this is a torch tip cleaner that I have that I like to clean these main jets out with. And you can see it just barely fits in there. And with the old jet, what part I didn't destroy, you can see it just barely fits in there. So I'm assuming we're going to be close on the jet size. You can see, it goes in there, guys. That's the old one. Like I said, this is all stuff I had laying around, so all we can do is give it a try and see how it runs. Nobody in their right mind, if you took this in a shop, would do this. This is stuff they used to do back in the day. So let's put it together and see what happens. Here's a little set of micro drill bits I have that in the past, if you couldn't get the machine to run right, if she was lacking just a little bit of fuel, you could take it, just open up the main jet just a hair. Gotta be careful. I don't know. It's a crapshoot on this. We're gonna see what we can do for the guy. Here's the difference in the float bowl after 45 minutes in the ultrasonic cleaner. Here's the carb. So I'll take my compressed air, my air compressor, I'll blow all these orifices out. I'll make damn sure I clean inside the needle here, or in the seat, I'm sorry. And down in the main jet. I'll blow everything out really good. And we'll reassemble her. Start by dropping the main jet in, just like this. And then we'll put our newly jetted main jet in there. That we hope is going to work. And then we'll get the needle and float out of there, and we gotta get the pilot jet out. Now what I did is I pulled the needle off the float so I can wipe this down with paper towel and get all this crap off. And I wanted to show you, it's gonna be hard to see on camera. There was crud. A lot of times I'll take my nail and stuff and I'll make sure I get this super clean. We are gonna vacuum test this needle too, because I don't know if this is gonna seat. It's a rubber tip needle on these, of course, and a brass seat. So now that we got that all cleaned up, I'm going to get a vacuum gauge and we'll see. Now that it's cleaned up, hopefully you can see where that spring sits right here. See in the dish. Try to bring it in the camera the best I can. You can see how that sits. Drop the float in, drop the needle in. Take our pin. Put our pin back in. Just like that. We'll verify that our needle, and if you can see it's moving up and down. Let me get my vacuum gauge to show you guys something. Remember what I was telling you guys about the micro drill bits? Well, here's a perfect example. Now, you do not want to break one off in this pilot jet. But, you take this one, it's, I don't even know the size on it, honestly, guys. I think it says it's very, very, very tiny. And it'll just slip right in there. And you'll be able to feel. Because this hole was blocked. It would not take any air through it. So now we'll shoot it out with some compressed air and some cleaner, and our pilot jet's ready to go. Okay, hook your vacuum gauge up to your primary fuel line supply. I just got a Mighty Vac. We got the carburetor standing up like this. We'll probably use the float bowl to help stand it up like that. Now take your gauge and just gently pump it till you hit about 5, right about there. And let her sit for about 5 minutes or so and make sure she doesn't leak. And we'll put her back together the rest of the way. Of course, this thing's being a pain, so it's not holding. It's dropping slowly. So I don't know if you guys can see, I took my magnifying glass and there still was a little bit of crud on this needle, right where it seats around the ring, or around the brass seat. Let me see if I can get it cleaned out of there and we'll retest. Alright, we need to clean the seat up too, so we're going to do the old toothpaste on a Q-tip trick. I had to make the Q-tip smaller, so I pulled some of the tissue off. Stick it down in there and just start working it in there and see if we can't get this damn thing cleaned out so it seats good. And you guys will see how well the toothpaste trick works. I know you'll never see it on camera, but look at the Q-tip. So you just keep working her down in there, and I wish you guys could see. You're going to see that brass. That brass is starting to polish right up. Well, I think we'll be good to go after this. So don't mind this float bowl here. You don't even want to see that thing. Looks like a disaster, but you can see that this one, you can see that we're holding vacuum on this for about 5 minutes. We're at about 5, around 5 on the gauge. That's it. Toothpaste did the trick, guys. Now let's put this thing back together. Alright, let's get the float bowl back on this thing. This direction right here. Get her tightened down. Now for our low idle circuit, which I made sure is cleaned out. You could take and blow. I know it sounds gross. You can put your lips on there and blow and you'll feel the air. Whatever you have to do, micro drill bits work great. Just showed you that. Pop that baby back in there. That. Put your idle screw in. What you do here with this is you just put it till you start to see the first thread come out of this side. Right about there, you'll see the first thread. Alright, let's get it back on the machine. I'm not going to go too into detail about putting it back on because you took it apart. So let's get it back on. Alright, you can also see from the ultrasonic cleaner that the governor is nice and loose now. It should be. I'm going to slide it on. Gasket stayed on. Hopefully this gasket will seal. Slide it on. Put your governor rod in. Put your governor spring in. Can use helostats, whatever they're called, the little pliers. I usually just use my fingers. Careful not to bend it all to hell. You're gonna have to slide it more on there than that to get it to reach. I know you're not gonna be able to see what I'm doing. Sorry. There you go. Boom, kaboom. It's your gasket. Make sure you pay very close attention to your gasket here, the direction of it. I'm not even sure I got it on right. I gotta look at it. just like that. You see the orifices are open. Choke is going to drop on. Lift it up like this, slip it in. Boom, boom. Might have to slide the carb back a hair. There's your choke assembly. And now we got to get the primer line on. Also, everything was tucked down in this little cover here. So slip the primer line on. And then we got to put the air intake on. It tucks all these wires in. I know it's going to be hard to see. So I think what I'm going to do is just show you what it looks like after I get it back on. I'm going to have to wrestle with it. Okay, that's what it'll look like. You'll see your stop switch right there, tucks underneath. And then right here, you'll see your stop switch wire again goes underneath here. And same thing with your primer line. And get the bolts back in there now. I should have mentioned before you get your choke assembly on, get your fuel line on there. I'm going to have to pull this choke assembly down for a quick second to be able to get my clamp on my fuel line. And there's a part in this video I really wish I was going to be able to show you, but there's no way you're going to see. This vacuum line for the crankcase, right here in this cover down here. Hopefully you guys can see that right there. This line for your vent, for your valve cover here, not for your crank, for your valve cover, well, it'll be the same thing. That needs to make sure you get that slipped on. Like I said, this is a little bit challenging to work on these. This is, if you're doing this at home, this might be one of them ones where you might want to just take it into a shop or get somebody to give you a hand. Like if you knew Mr. SRX personally, Mr. SRX will get you going. So, alright, let me wrestle with this. God, I hate these things. Like I said, make sure you get that crankcase vent line lined up. You'll feel it go on. And that should be it. We got to line the choke up in the plate here so we can get the plate on. Which that can be a kind of tricky too. Let me see. Well, this cover's just not being friendly. That's alright, we'll get her. We'll definitely get her. There we go. Line up your choke rod first. Now you got to come back in here and make sure that your vent is on. It'll push on with the cover. Make sure your wires and stuff and your choke is not getting pinched by this case either, right here. You don't want that stuff tore up. And I think that's it, guys. I think we're ready to bolt this thing back together. So I'll find all the bolts and we'll start getting everything tightened back up to the way it was. I'm not going to bore you in this part of the video. I'm just going to go ahead and put the rest of it together. It's self-explanatory. You guys took it apart. I hope you know how to put it back together. I wanted to mention too, as I'm putting this belt housing back on, some of these belt housings on different two-stage machines, you have to have the handles clamped down because there's actually a guide built in there for the belts. This one doesn't have that, but just be aware of what you have, okay? Another thing I forgot to mention in this video is check the insides of these gas tanks. A lot of times they'll rust up. You have to take BBs or something, shake it in there and clean it out. They got special stuff you can put in there. This one's clean. I just want to that thing run for a while, make sure what we did is correct. It's running super good, so I think we did it. Stay tuned. We got this power washer we're working on for the next video. Hit the subscribe button.